You are now tuned in to the On Track with All My People podcast with your hosts, Amber Peters, A.K.A. Mizz P.
And Daitwan David, A.K.A. Dr. Change. Ain't nothing strange about it. A.K.A. Mr. David, A.K.A. Ayo Miss.
Oh my God, Daitwan, can we just start the show already?
Y'all better buckle up, folks. We're in for a turbulent winter or fall. FAFSA is bringing new changes. I hope you're ready.
All right, so once again, welcome back to On Track with All My People.
Season 3.
Season 3. This is
Amber Peters, A.K.A. Mizz P.
And this is Daitwan David, A.K.A. Dr. Change. We're back.
It's been a long summer, guys. We missed you.
It has been a long summer, and it looks like it's going to be a crazier fall. But let me just tell you this. There's supposed to be summer goals. I clearly didn't achieve my summer goals because I'm re-wearing, right, this corset that you brought me. I'm bringing it back, right? And this is sort of like waist beads in a sense. How your women be wearing waist beads. So this lets me know that I ain't hit my fitness goal.
That's your business.
So whatever was supposed to be the summer goal.
My back's still big this summer, so I don't care.
there is supposed to be a plan to unbig the back. That's supposed to be the plan. But it didn't happen.
It got bigger. It's okay.
Amber, talk to them. Like,
we still alive.
so tell us one thing that you enjoyed from the summer, and one thing you wish you would have been able to do or accomplish.
I got to hang out with friends. I got to travel, guys. If you know me, I love my house too much, way too much. So I actually got to get out of the house, so that was wonderful. Shout
out to that. In addition to that, I think I also had an opportunity to travel. Big things, big changes coming for me and my family. And with that, Amber, you also had a chance to travel to an NCAN conference.
Yes.
Where you learned some things. I'm proud of you for getting out the house.
Me too.
And doing something meaningful.
Me too.
The conference was hopefully beneficial to you and our audience and the students. Talk about it. What was happening at that conference?
Y'all see my face?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
So NCAN Train the Trainer. What I will say, it was great to be in community. There were over 500 people in attendance that do this work, that are ready to support with this new FAFSA, A.K.A. the Better FAFSA, coming out this December. Y'all heard that right, December.
2023.
Right? So we were just like being able to see a bit of the application. I think we were the only part that kind of annoyed us is that we thought we were going to get the full demo. We did get the demo, but we got it straight from the FSA partners. We got that demo last week. We'll talk about that as well. But Train the Trainer was an interesting ride because it was just like there was still stuff that was unclear when we were there. Things are getting more clear as the days go by, but when we got there, we was just like, we thought we were going to be able to touch stuff. We were going to be able to be in the application. That didn't happen. But we did get lots of great information to help us prepare for the fall.
So let's think about this really quickly. When you arrived there and you started the training, what was the general sentiment? What was the energy before y'all dug into like some of the content? Like
before, it's going to be a heavy lift. It's going to be a heavy lift for all of us, and it's going to take a village. And that is the reason why they convened so many people in one place, is because we need to start building as a community around, how we are going to support our students, right? And so it was very clear that this was going to be a community venture, right? Just from the outset, from how they set up the tables, for how they had us kind of talking to each other, that was going to be apparent, and it's going to be apparent in the work. So I think that's what it set the tone for in the beginning. None of us knew what we were going to get at all. We just assumed a lot of things, right? We assumed a lot of things in terms of content, and also like the hands-on portion. We assumed a lot about that, but what was very apparent is that community was going to be a big part of this.
So I know you're going to get into the highlights because that's what I want. Like sports, we have our sports shows where we're not necessarily watching the entire game. We get the previews of like what was the best parts of it, what was the worst parts of it.
Yeah.
But prior to that, I know that FAFSA went online in 97, right? And this is being viewed as probably one of the most controversial changes that FAFSA has undergone.
In heaven.
Based on what you've been able to research, because you're light years ahead of me in terms of understanding like the changes or whatever, like what informed this particular change?
So a lot of this is law changes. So there was a privacy policy law in place that affects how data is collected. So that was one of the things that made the FAFSA change. And also there was something about the FAFSA itself, the actual application, the amount of questions it has, the type of questions it asks. Those laws changed. I'll put them down below so you can see the changes, because I can't remember them off the top of my head, but those two laws are the reason why FAFSA has to go through this whole overhaul process.
So speaking of overhaul, here are the highlights. We're saying some goodbyes. Like, we're saying goodbye to summer. We're transitioning into the fall, right? But we're saying some goodbyes. What are we saying goodbye to?
Goodbye, EFC. Goodbye. EFC. You served your purpose, but now we are going to be introduced to something called the SAI, Student Aid Index, and that's going to replace the EFC.
Expected family contribution.
A little bit different.
Right.
Yeah, the formula is going to be a little bit different. It will not consider families with multiple children, which was sad for me, because I know, sometimes you have those parents who have like multiple children, like they're going in back to back, right? So this is going to affect some families in the future. So
typically you would, in doing the application, there's a question that would ask you, are there any other students in the family that are full-time or whatever the case may be? And just in terms of the logic and the concept, you would be able to like demonstrate an increased financial need because of that, right? Because there's multiple children or multiple family members that are actually going to college with that cost.
FAFSA is not really making that determination, right? The school makes the final determination on how that money is delivered, but, right, they do take it into account in that formulation. So, but it's gone now.
EFC is gone.
EFC's gone.
Okay.
DRT, thank you, Jesus.
This is a win.
God.
This is a win.
It's God.
Explain to the people DRT.
DRT is the thing that never worked.
Data retrieval tool.
The data retrieval tool. We have to literally be lucky for it to work for you. Like, you would have the kid go on, and pretty much what it is taking data from the IRS and putting it directly onto the FAFSA, which like takes away some of the steps, right? But the thing about it is, when it worked, it was great, but when it didn't work, it was not great, right? And so it kind of, hampered the process for some students, because maybe they go back in and they do it manually and they put things wrong, right? Which delays their application a lot. So
let me touch on that really quick. One of the things that I know is that like that data retrieval tool process was sort of like the process of when you're trying to check to see when your tax return is coming in.
Pretty much.
Like, you have to put in the address exactly, right? Like, or else it's going to say nothing was filed, nothing is showing up. There's an error message or whatever.
Whoops.
And a lot of times there's a lot of like small changes that we don't know about, that students don't know about as well, and we're just sitting there forever. And then it increases the likelihood, because it's not coming directly from the IRS, that students are going to be randomly selected with the bunny ears, in case y'all can't see me, for verification.
There's still going to be verification. So
okay.
Sorry, that didn't go away.
So DRT is being replaced by what?
It's called DDX, Data Something Exchange, but that is going to be the way that we hook directly to the IRS. So there's no middleman. DRT was a middleman for the IRS, but now we're going directly to the IRS. Do not pass go, do not collect $200. We're connected directly to the IRS this time.
Going to the source, no plug necessary.
Exactly.
Okay, that's a win.
The other thing that's going bye-bye is the SAR, right? Student aid report, the thing that you get at the end of the FAFSA, is going goodbye, right?
Justify this for me. Explain that.
So they're changing it. They just changed the language because they felt like student aid report didn't really capture what it actually was, and people didn't really know what it was per se. So now it is going to be FSS, FAFSA something summary. It's pretty much a summary of everything you did on the FAFSA, similar to what the SAR report looked like, but it's just a summary of all the things that happened in the FAFSA. So that's the only thing.
I will need to see why the change was necessary and why that summary is important. But let's continue to go on. New language.
So we talked about the FSA, the FSS, the SAI. We talked about DDX, right?
For sure.
We're also going to have something called contributors. So what we used to call parents before, now we're calling contributors, people who contribute to the form, right? So those will be like the parents or whoever is signing the FAFSA for the student. Also, household size is no longer. We'll be using family size instead, which is pretty much the same thing. Right?
Is it? I mean, it is pretty much the same thing in terms of like the connotation of like language, right? But in terms of them, is it the same?
So pretty much the family size is whoever the parents are providing financial support for. So that is going to be the family size this time. The other thing that changed is that there is something called consent, right? Consent was said a lot during this all the things. I've been to like 6 of these things, like 6 workshops so far, and everybody's talking about this word consent, right? And so consent means, remember this privacy policy that we now have.
For sure.
The student has to give consent to move on to the rest of the form. Now, the student can finish the form and not give consent, but their application will not be processed.
I did.
Same for the parents.
See
okay, so they
sure.
must give consent to move on through the application, to actually submit the application. If they do not give consent, it's not happening. So just something to note, in new vocabulary, because that one was the big one. I was like, oh, wow, consent. I kept hearing it a lot. It's there for a reason.
What do we think? What do we know students are consenting to? Parents are consenting. Are they consenting to access to this information? Or
pretty much access to the information. So you're giving them essentially permission to go to the IRS on your behalf to get your information from the IRS. So in order for them to do that, you have to give them consent to do that. Now, there's no, you cannot give consent, and guess what? Your application just won't get processed. You won't get no money. Good luck.
That's a tough part. Yeah, that's rough.
It is what it is, and they were very clear about that. Like, do not give consent, do not get no money. That's the name of the game here.
Now, here's an interesting part. There are parents that would have done the DRT or whatever the case may be, and just been like, I think, all right, it is what it is. Pull it from the IRS, cool. But using the word consent seems like that might scare parents off. Like, what am I really consenting to? Like, why are you using that language?
It does give. So, like, the one thing that I'm gonna say that I like about the new FAFSA, because we were able to see the demo last week, so we actually got to see the inside of the form finally.
Okay.
After, I think I've been on 6 of these since January. We just getting to see the inside of the form. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But it's kind of nice to see that they have these onboarding screens. So if you don't know what you're doing, they're kind of explaining before you do a big process. So before you give consent, there's all the legalese, jargon.
For sure.
This is why you're doing it. This is what happens when you give consent, blah, blah, blah. It gives you that screen before you can even press anything. So that's the good part.
Listen, I'm about to start using that word in the worst way possible. Like, I give you consent to still be my friend.
Oh, Lord.
I want you to understand how valuable that is. Don't do that. Don't do that to the good people. Don't do that to the good people. Other changes.
So the application is going to be split into 2 parts. This was my big issue. I didn't like this part. So they're splitting the application into 2, which means this. Parents, the student can start the form, and the students will be the ones who start the form.
Okay.
And then in the middle of their process, when we get to the part where it's asking for family information, the student has to then invite their parents to the form by sending them a link.
Lord, help us. Okay. Okay.
Now, you know.
Let me put on my hat.
And I know.
Let me put on my hat.
And we know that right there gonna be a problem, right? If you know, you know. If you do this work, you understand.
Wow.
How this is going to be an issue for us.
Let me put on my hat for a second. Let me lament for a second. Counselor hat. There are some of my students that are terrible, many, at checking their email. Mm-hmm. But you know what's worse than a student checking their email? Parents not know how to navigate their emails. Right, like, what am I looking for? A lot of parents not even having emails, right? So, like, oftentimes when we're doing the application, I'm asking the student to use their school email address and their personal one because their parents just don't have access to that. This is something that I probably would have pushed back on, but I think in some ways it's just semantics because either way, what we're saying is there needs to be two distinct email addresses from what I'm gathering.
Yes, so there has to be. The parents have to have their own email. So before, back in the day, right, kids used to like use their email for both parts. Yeah, that's not gonna happen this year. No, they gotta have their own email. Even to get their FSA ID, they have to have their own email, right? So it's very, very important that we nail that down. That we having those conversations with the families early. Like if you don't have an email, it's 2023. You should have one. But also be checking it also because there's going to be stuff for your kid in there, right? So we got to really make sure that they are on it when it comes to the email. And also understanding this part of being like invited to the form, right? Like, so the parent, I know sometimes the parents kind of take the helm and just try to do everything by themselves. They're kind of trying to crack down on that by like splitting it up. So, yeah, everybody got to do their part, right? Because if one part is not done, like the whole application is invalidated, right? So like there's nothing that you can do if the parent's part is not done.
So let me ask you this question, which I think might be helpful. Can a parent start their part without a student? So it is
gotta be invited.
It's linear in a sense, or it's systematic. Student
starts because it's their application, which it always should have been in the first place. If you going to college, there should be no reason why your mama touching the form that you need to, like. So the kid needs to be the one to start the process, and then they're going to they're going to fill out some information about the parent. They're going to hit a little button, and it's going to send that link to the parent. The parent is going to complete their section.
So for clarification, and I know this is so fresh, we're still kind of learning this together. Do you believe that a student submits their information, and by the time he sends it to the parent, the student part is done, or are there still other steps for the student to do?
The student part should be finished.
Okay.
Student part should be finished.
Then it gets to the parent, and then the parents got to take on their role. One thing, and I know we're going to talk about like best practices, but one thing I want to say is that this might be an opportunity for schools to support families in need of being able to kind of get acclimated to technology, right?
Yes.
Like if they're using Google right now, it's a pain in the behind, but they have the two-step verification. Mm-hmm. So now there's the other part of like, hey, can the parents even get access to their phone? And like, there's just so many other layers to this. But I think there's an opportunity for schools to kind of support the community and just like advancing like technical technology in terms of that literacy there.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Definitely.
What else we got going on?
There's a lot of stuff that can prevent submission. They'll see within the application, you missed this, you didn't do that. Sorry, womp, right? Also, they have 45 days from the start of that application to complete it.
Yeah,
right?
Okay.
And then when the parents also get a notification. Hello, ma'am, sir. If you don't get this application submitted by this time, you going back to the beginning, right? And it will start you on over. So it is very, very important that when we are ready to start these applications, and that's part of the best practice, right? If we know that it opens in December, if you want to make a time frame where everybody's applying at the same time, just to like minimize anybody having to start their application over, that is something that we're just going to have to do because like there's time limits on these things now. So if they don't get it done within a certain time frame.
So let me jump into that really quickly because 45 days, I think. Conceptually, if you're not familiar with this, you're probably just like, hey, that is a lot of time. But then there are barriers and hiccups that may jump within that process. I actually like, right now, I need to get more information, but I kind of like the 45 days. But there are going to be some instances where parents are going to have to, amend their taxes or find their taxes and do these other things. And a student may have been prompted by their school to start the application. And then you're going to create this issue. And then they're going to create more frustration. Because a student, what's probably more frustrating than a student not wanting to do it is a student that's having to do it again.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think that we are going to have to be very strategic about like how we roll this aspect out and explaining to them that this is a deadline. This could be a for sure like a life lesson on like urgency, right? Like and being able to kind of manage your time effectively.
Absolutely, 100%.
You jumped into this. You mentioned parents need an FSA ID. There's a significant change here.
Oh, yeah.
Please talk about it.
So parents who are undocumented now can get an FSA ID. It's
For sure.
not open right now, right? So you got to wait closer to December. Right now, that is not the case. So because I believe the 2023-24 application is still out for people who are attending this fall and spring, because that application is still kind of sort of like, people can still complete that application right now because it is open.
Okay.
The FSA ID has not changed for that, but it will later on. So parents will have the option of saying that they don't have a social security number. They can just check a box and they'll move through the process. Which is great because before, we would just put zeros in for the parent and things like that. But now, they're getting to sign off, no paper copies of anything, right? The snail mail, y'all remember, right? I had a couple of kids that went through that this year. They submitted, and I'm like, so did you hear anything? And it's been months and nothing, right?
Submitted the paper copy.
The paper copy.
And
you're
have
waiting
to wait
forever because
sure.
snail mail, then they have to get it in, and they got to process it, then they got to upload it to your application and say, they actually whole process. So they're trying to eliminate that process by letting the undocumented parents be able to do the FSA ID process.
So that sounds like a win. That sounds
it's
like
a
win
for me.
It removes the barrier of snail mail. You have these different challenges related to that you don't have to worry about, and the student can actually support their parent in creating an FSA ID. Now, I want to be able to try to look at this from the other side. You are an undocumented parent that is filling out like formal documents with a federal agency. How do we get them to understand that this is not something to be of concern?
I mean, it's all in communication, right? It's all in communication. You have to build trust with these families in order for them to understand like what's happening, right? It's a government agency. I would be scared too.
For sure.
So it's having conversations with the families because there's a lot of data that's collected within the FAFSA that's not shared with anybody but the Department of Education. It's not going to leave out there. It's not going to have implications for whether you are deported or anything like that. None of that information can be used for those purposes. It's just to figure out who's providing your support and, how much aid you can actually qualify for. That's all it's there for.
Yeah, and I think the main thing you said is building trust, open communication.
Very much
schools,
so.
Not just within New York City that may have a different context from many other areas in the country, but schools are definitely going to have to do a good job of helping families to feel comfortable about this process, because what I'm also understanding now is that with the paper copy, which seems like less of a threat, not being an option, that families are going to now have to reconcile with the fact that they cannot have their child move to the process unless they are involved, even if they're undocumented.
Yep.
So that is a real conversation to have. I want to get back to the time thing in the 45 days thing, because I know that a part of what we're doing with this podcast is definitely speaking to practitioners in New York City, but I know at some point in time that we're going to have some kind of reach, right? So you mentioned that you heard something in terms of the timeline. This comes out in December, and then other states. Other states. What did you hear about? What's the example?
So I was talking to a gentleman at the trainer, and he happened to work nationally, right? So his organization is nationally recognized, and his concern was his students in Texas. Because apparently in Texas, they was like, January 15th is the deadline, babes. We do not care.
Deadline for their FAFSA application to be submitted.
So what, when you're in New York, you just assume everybody has the same date. But if you go to FAFSA's website, there is actually a listing of when certain applications are open for different states, right? And some of them is as early as January. You have some in March, some in February, some in April, right? Everybody's is not due in June, right? Most people's are due in June. I believe June 30th is the last day, even though I've seen people submit way after that. But that's technically the deadline. Also, schools have their own financial aid deadlines as well, because they have to package students. So you have to look at both, right? So you look at the state deadline. What is the state deadline saying? And then for certain schools, you need to look at their deadlines as well to make sure that you're getting the application in at the proper time.
Yeah, so I've seen like the unofficial deadline for students in New York and New York City, New York State. But typically speaking, like let's say I'm an August graduate, I still can apply for FAFSA for the fall and be able to be eligible to get aid. It's not advised that students are waiting that long because they want to be able to make an informed decision with all of the information, such as their financial aid package. So that is something that I want to make sure is clear. You had a couple of other things where, like, you talked about the onboarding process, and you also mentioned here in some of our notes, like their explainer videos. What is that about?
So they have explainer videos this time. So I don't know if you guys know, but FAFSA has a bomb kind of like YouTube channel. We'll link that below, but like they have a great YouTube channel that kind of gives these little like mini explainer videos. So they're going to be taking those same videos that they create for the FAFSA channel. They're going to be putting them directly into the application. So before kids get to big processes that they don't really understand what they're signing up for, they're going to explain to them, right? A loan is this, right? Or you're doing this FAFSA so you can get money, blah, 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 right? Like they're really explaining the process and what they are doing step by step, which is great. And I really, really, really like appreciate that because sometimes, you know, like they're going through the application, they have no idea what they're doing. I noticed that a lot of students have the doing down. It's the knowing part that we leave out, right? And so this will help them to have the knowing and the doing together.
The knowing and the doing together. That's going to tie into one of our other episodes, but I think that is a bar. And also with the videos being readily accessible, I think families can be able to better get access and like content to it, like context to what is going on. And it's more uniform across the board. The form is coming out which month? December. It's coming out in December, which is a change. For the past couple of years, it's been coming out October 1st.
October 1st. It will go back to October 1st next year. It is only for this year because they're still building the plane while they're flying it, right? That's the reason why we haven't been able to touch and play with it, because usually we'll have, like, a demo site that we can play with and stuff like that, and we'll act like a fake student and
for sure.
Be able to, like, experience the site. Yeah, we ain't getting that no time soon. So right now, because they're, still making sure there's tweaks, if you have been present in this field for a while, you've seen the different iterations of this application,
for
right?
Sure.
And I remember the very last big change that they had when they kind of changed the site. It was like dark blue and stuff like that. It went from like that white site to like dark blue. When it went to that, it was glitchy as hell. So let them do what they need to do. Right. So hopefully the user experience is a little bit better. I'm hoping.
That's the
key
part. User experience within this process. Like I've done thousands of applications easily. I've done thousands of applications in a single year. And so the user experience sometimes for me of having so many reps is abysmal sometimes. And like you start to lack confidence. And this is from somebody that's been in the field for a while.
Oh yeah, those last year changes. I said, wait a minute, right? Like it was crazy because it felt like, last year there was some big changes that happened too. They took some things off the application and like reinstituted some other things and all that. So when I went back into the application, I had literally been doing applications for a whole year prior. I get to the new application, I'm like, I don't know what nothing is.
Yes.
I'm so annoyed.
Some of these things had to be freestyle for me, for sure.
It's like I think I know what I'm doing. Like I know what to look out for, but I didn't know where they were on the application.
For sure. I think with organizations like NCAN and a few others, they're actually rolling out like training sessions monthly, so that people that are practitioners get an opportunity to fully understand this information. We understand that this is going to be a heavy lift for many people. It's going to have a huge learning curve as well. So with that, we talked about some of the challenges. We talked about some of the things that we, appreciate about the changes. We want to be able to kind of summarize a couple of things. I know both of us have hopes that FSA is going to provide clarity about like the process and the confusion that people have about this process. Definitely to over communicate and consistently, and also have consistency with like how they are supporting people through this process. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering if the FAFSA like the hotline and the support changes.
All that will be there. All that will be there. They're there's going to be a lot of different things. They're going to have lots of sessions for families. They're going to have lots of sessions for the people who are actually doing this work. So you'll see lots of trainings coming out. There's also a great YouTube channel from the FSA partners for the last demo that they did, so you can kind of see the inside of the FAFSA.
For
so
sure.
You can start making your determinations of what you need to do this fall to get your kids through that whole application. So there's lots of things that are coming. So I will say that they really thought about trying to make sure that you understood what was happening and why and things like that. They're doing a lot better. So I'm really excited about that.
So with that being said, I don't want to get too controversial. One of the things that I'm wondering and hoping is how many practitioners were in the room when these changes were made?
I don't know.
Right,
Didn't seem like none.
That's a
Honestly,
really important question.
I think for me, like, my annoyance was I cannot see a counselor looking at this thing and was like, yeah, let's separate it and put it in 2 parts.
Right.
Let's make sure that the student can send the... Nobody thought it. None of us would have said that because we like to get it done in one shot if we can, right?
For
so
sure.
like having this process where you're gonna have to have like 2 pieces of the puzzle. I know none of us said yes to that. That was not a us thing.
Yeah, I would really like to know how it works. But with the whole thing is we also have the hopes that people are going to embrace the chain in some way, shape, or form, unless they want to rally against the machine. But with that, we're hoping that people have an open mind to the change. It is what it is at this moment in time, that people are going to be willing to provide feedback that can improve changes. But for right now, the system is what it is. It's rolling out in December. They may make some final tweaks. I don't think they'll do a complete overhaul of anything. Yeah. So in terms of one key question, how should educators prepare? Like, what would be your top 3 ways?
So NCAN has recommended, instead of doing FAFSA events, which we've done in the past, right, where we invite families out and we try to knock out the application at once, that you might have to have a 2-parter, right? That you can still have your event for FAFSA later, but right now what you need to plan is an FSA ID event.
For
right?
sure.
Students can do that in advisory if you have advisory going on at your school. If you're able to do one-on-ones with students to get them their FSA ID, that's recommended. If your kids can get it before, like everything really starts and begins, maybe it's an assignment on the Google Classroom, that they're able to get their part done, right? And you can be able to be the guidance for them. And then have maybe a family event where the parents could come and sign up for their FSA ID and knock that out. And then later when the application actually opens and you have, and you have a date of when you want to roll this out, because that's going to be the important part,
for
right?
Sure.
Because if we have these time frames involved, we want to make sure that we're not just doing things willy-nilly, that we have an actual strategic plan of when we're going to roll this thing out, like the full application, okay? So you could do that event and have everybody come to wherever your space is. Do it on Zoom, right? You might have to do multiple things. You might have an in-person one. You might have one over Zoom where you're going step by step, piece by piece. You got to do what you got to do. It is what it is. But that is very much encouraged. And the other part is just communication, right? Speaking with the families ahead of time. Here's the big changes. Here's how it's going to affect you. Here's what we need you to do to be ready for December. Whether that is through emails, through your social media, whatever you do to get your families on board, you're going to need to do more of that this year.
FSA ID is going to be the major hurdle.
Yes. Oh, wait. I forgot to say this part. So in the FSA ID, once you said that, so when we were at the conference, the Train the Trainer, they said it's part of the FSA ID, the new change, there is going to be, so if you're familiar with getting your credit report, you ever tried to get your credit report off of freecreditreport.com? And they'd be like, did you have a 97 Durango in 1997? Does this sound like your license plate?
Yeah.
43387, right? They're going to be asking those kind of questions.
No.
I forgot. As soon as you said that, I was like, I forgot to say this. Y'all, when they said that, I think everybody in the room was like this. What?
That's
What are we
terrible.
doing?
Yeah, that's terrible.
Why would you do that to people? I hate it. It has been several times where I didn't get my credit report because they like, this ain't really you. I'm like, I ain't never had none of that. What do you mean? So yeah, expect that as part of the FSA process.
With people, I wonder how does that work with people without established history because they haven't been in the country that long.
I don't know, but this is what they want. So
I thought I was going to end this episode pretty smooth.
Sorry, I forgot.
That has me in my feelings.
My bad.
Honestly.
Sorry.
Especially in working directly with families. Now, I'm not just working with students.
I know. I know.
All right. So we mentioned that. What is one thing that you want people to kind of get out of like this experience that is imminent, like it's happening, regardless of how people feel?
Plan accordingly.
Plan accordingly.
Plan accordingly. We cannot do seat of our pants this year. We need to have, when are things happening? College applications are happening this month and this month. December, we're prepping for FAFSA, right? Maybe we're, having an information session, whatever. January, we're actually doing the FAFSA. You need to have a plan, a strategic plan in place for your practice because you need to make sure that you are anticipating anything that's going to go awry. It's a new application. We know what happens with new applications. It's going to be a mess, right? So we have to prepare for the mess. Obviously, there's certain things that you can't prepare for, but like if you have all your other things, your other duckies in a row, it's going to be easy to like get through this process.
For sure.
Plan accordingly.
And beyond the plan, execute the plan accordingly in advance, right? Like, so I need families. You're going to need your 1040 from and your IT-201. You're going to still need those documents. So please make sure that you have those things ready. In addition to that, please just make sure, I'm assuming they're still doing prior in terms of using.
Yes. It will be prior by the time people actually touch the application.
Okay.
So 2022.
Okay. So having that documentation still set. The other thing to kind of make sure is happening is just more so like I'm just thinking about like there's just a lot of unanswered things and people need to ask a lot of questions. Like especially connected to you, to your personal circumstances. Yes. So we're looking forward to people getting connected to this, utilizing this information, utilizing the resources. And once again, share this video because I'm here with
Amber Peters, A.K.A. Mizz P.
And I am Daitwan David, Dr. Change.
Oh, yeah, wait. Follow us on LinkedIn. If you haven't already, follow us on LinkedIn.
Please do.
We have a special place where we're going to keep all of this content. And also follow us on Instagram, OTWAMP. Go follow us on there. And if you want to just listen to us, get us on Spotify. We're on there, too.
There you go.
So, yeah.
And by the next time y'all see me, I'm hopefully not wearing this shirt anymore. It's corset, this waist bead shirt.
Sorry.
Amber,
I'm big back.
Don't do me like that. I'm getting you back on the next episode. We're out of here.
Well.
Terrible.
Bye.
Terrible.